The moment Isaiah stepped into the Dupree mansion, the air itself seemed to crack with tension, as if the walls had been holding their breath for decades, waiting for this instant. In his hands, he carried not just evidence, but the power to obliterate everything the family had built: wealth, reputation, loyalty, and the illusion of safety. Nicole froze, heart hammering, as a cold, unmistakable truth washed over her. Everything they had hidden, every carefully buried secret, every life they had manipulated, could explode into ruin with a single revelation. The mansion, once a sanctuary of power and control, became a cage of fear, suspicion, and smoldering rage. In that moment, Nicole realized that the Dupree Empire, the very foundation of their identity, was not just threatened, it was already crumbling from within, and the architect of its destruction was standing right in front of her, calm, merciless, and unyielding. Isaiah's sudden appearance shattered the fragile veneer of stability surrounding the Dupree family, turning their grandiose mansion into a crucible of fear, anger, and unspoken resentment. The moment he stepped through the doors, the air thickened, heavy with the weight of secrets long buried and alliances tenuously held together. Each member of the family felt it, the pulse of dread, the cold stab of panic, and the smoldering ember of rage igniting deep within. Isaiah carried more than just evidence, he carried the power to dismantle an empire built on wealth, influence, and meticulous deception. Nicole's mind raced, her chest tightening with a mix of terror and fury. She realized, in a visceral way, that every carefully constructed lie, every manipulation she had orchestrated to protect the family's image, was now on the brink of being exposed. Isaiah laid out documents, photographs, and obscure connections to an old murder case, a tragedy that had been carefully erased from public knowledge but never from memory. Each piece of evidence was a precision strike aimed at the heart of Dupree authority. Nicole felt the walls of her control closing in, and a primal anger surged through her, a furious, protective instinct to defend not just the family's reputation, but her own survival. She grappled with the impossibility of the choices before her: confront Isaiah directly and risk losing everything she had fought to maintain, or retreat and watch the empire collapse, powerless as the truth shredded their legacy. The tension within her was suffocating, a tempest of conflicting impulses that demanded action even as fear screamed for caution. The rest of the Dupree family sensed the seismic shift immediately. Years of concealed betrayals, secret financial manipulations, and private vendettas that had gone unnoticed in the shadowed corners of the mansion were suddenly illuminated by Isaiah's calculated intrusion. Suspicion blossomed into hostility, and every glance carried the weight of unspoken accusations. The bonds of loyalty fractured as members assessed one another, weighing past transgressions against present survival. Each Dupree knew that the empire they had taken for granted teetered on the knife's edge, and Isaiah held the blade. Isaiah himself was a study in controlled menace. Without a single word, his presence conveyed dominance. He did not need to raise his voice. The documents, the photographs, the undeniable evidence, spoke louder than any threat. Nicole watched him and understood that this was no mere confrontation, it was an exposure ritual, a revelation of all the sins and miscalculations that had allowed her family to ascend and remain untouchable for decades. Every member of the Dupree family had to face their own culpability, decisions made in self-interest, alliances formed from opportunism, moments when conscience was overridden by greed. Isaiah's gaze was relentless, forcing them all to reckon with the truth they had fought to bury. As the evidence mounted, Nicole felt her internal conflict spiral. Anger at Isaiah burned alongside an escalating panic, each wave of emotion feeding the other. Her mind mapped out strategies, counter-strategies, and contingencies, all in a desperate bid to retain control. But with each passing moment, the inevitability of exposure loomed larger. She understood that no single action could fully protect the Dupree legacy now. Every calculated move risked revealing more, every hesitation could embolden Isaiah further. Rage, fear, and despair intertwined, creating a pressure cooker of psychological torment that left Nicole teetering on the edge of collapse. The other members of the family were similarly trapped. Their internal dialogues were a tangle of self-preservation, blame, and mounting hostility. Long-standing grievances that had simmered beneath the surface now erupted into sharp, almost palpable tension. Siblings, cousins, and distant relatives scrutinized each other, searching for weaknesses, unspoken alliances, and signs of betrayal. Each Dupree had, at some point, exploited the vulnerabilities of another. Now those same vulnerabilities could be weaponized, turned against them in a cruel reflection of their own tactics. The mansion was no longer a home, it had transformed into a battlefield, a psychological war zone where the currency was fear and the stakes were life-altering consequences. Isaiah's final revelation, the piece of evidence that left no room for denial, was cataclysmic. The duplicity, the carefully maintained illusions, the orchestrated facades all crumbled in an instant. Rage consumed Nicole entirely, mixing with a bone-deep despair as she realized that every choice she had made to protect her family's image had only deepened the potential for ruin. Every decision, every scheme, every secret that had seemed prudent now seemed like a chain tightening around her neck. The family's wealth, their influence, their carefully curated social status. Everything was at risk of being obliterated in the glare of revelation. What unfolded in the hours following Isaiah's revelations was a slow, relentless unraveling of the Dupree family. Fear bred paranoia, and paranoia festered into outright hostility. Each member began to act according to self-preservation, calculating betrayals and weighing risks in a frantic effort to mitigate the damage. Nicole, at the center of it all, oscillated between desperation and ruthless determination, willing to manipulate, deceive, or destroy in a bid to control the narrative. Isaiah, calm and measured, became both observer and arbiter of this psychological collapse, his presence amplifying every fissure within the family structure. The emotional landscape was apocalyptic. The mansion, once a symbol of power and cohesion, became a theater of raw human emotion, rage, despair, betrayal, and fear intertwined with the kind of suffocating tension that could ignite at any wrong glance or misstep. The family realized that the murder case Isaiah had resurrected was more than a secret, it was a detonator, capable of obliterating the social and financial scaffolding that had supported the Dupree name for generations. Alliances were tested, loyalties strained to the breaking point, and the veneer of familial solidarity peeled away to reveal a volatile mixture of ambition, guilt, and unchecked fury. Nicole's internal struggle reached a fever pitch. Every tactic she considered to counter Isaiah carried risk, and yet inaction was equally dangerous. Her anger, sharp and consuming, became a weapon as she maneuvered in silence, a storm of calculated responses designed to contain the fallout. But Isaiah's precision and awareness made each move fraught with peril. It was no longer merely about controlling a secret, it was about survival in the face of a truth too potent to ignore, a legacy too fragile to defend, and a reality that threatened to consume them all. In the days that followed, the Dupree family faced the unbearable tension of living under the shadow of revelation. Relationships strained to snapping points, friendships fractured, and long-buried resentments erupted with violent intensity. The mansion itself seemed to reflect the chaos within, every ornate room and gleaming corridor echoing with suspicion and the unspoken threat of exposure. No one was immune, no one could hide. The intricacies of past crimes, hidden ambitions, and unspoken betrayals collided, creating a relentless atmosphere of dread and anger that made every interaction a test of endurance and wit. Isaiah, meanwhile, remained the calm eye in this storm, an unmovable presence whose knowledge and control turned fear into a tangible weapon. His revelations forced the Duprees to confront their own darkness, the parts of themselves they had hoped to conceal from the world and even from each other. Every secret exposed, every betrayal revealed, left them more vulnerable, more desperate, and more prone to destructive impulses. What was at stake was not merely wealth or reputation, but the very cohesion of the family, the integrity of their identity, and the fragile sense of self that each member had constructed over decades. The collision of fear, rage, and survival instincts created moments of shocking intensity. Nicole's decisions became increasingly audacious, fueled by anger yet tempered by the awareness that a single misstep could mean disaster. Other family members, driven by a mix of terror and opportunism, engaged in maneuvers that exposed hidden treacheries and unearthed past transgressions. In this crucible, every relationship was tested, every moral boundary challenged, and every person forced to confront the limits of loyalty and the cost of ambition. As the truth fully emerged, it was clear that the Dupree family could never return to the status quo. Isaiah's intervention had irrevocably altered the landscape of power, loyalty, and trust. The murder case, once buried, now functioned as a lens through which every past action was scrutinized, every decision evaluated for betrayal or moral compromise. The family's anger, frustration, and despair coalesced into a potent, almost tangible force, pushing each member to their limits and forcing choices that would reverberate for years to come. By the time the last pieces of Isaiah's evidence were laid bare, the Dupree family existed in a state of suspended collapse, a volatile mix of fear, fury, and psychological exhaustion. The mansion, once a bastion of power, stood as a monument to the fragility of human ambition and the destructive potential of secrets. Every family member was trapped in a web of their own making, confronted by the consequences of past actions and the relentless pressure of exposure. Rage and panic coexisted with strategic calculation, and the line between survival and self-destruction blurred with every passing hour. In the aftermath, the Dupree legacy was irrevocably fractured. Isaiah, though seemingly an outsider, had become the force that revealed the truth hidden beneath layers of manipulation, greed, and ambition. Nicole, and the family as a whole, had no choice but to navigate the wreckage of their own making, a world where secrets had exploded into daylight, where trust was obliterated, and where the raw power of anger, fear, and revenge dominated every decision. The Dupree family would never be whole again. They were left to grapple with the staggering consequences of betrayal, the corrosive weight of ambition, and the unrelenting presence of a truth that could not be undone. When the last shred of secrecy was ripped from the shadows, the Dupree mansion felt less like a home and more like a tomb. Isaiah's revelations had torn through layers of deceit, exposing every hidden sin, every calculated betrayal, and every unspoken grudge that had festered for decades. Nicole stood at the center of the chaos, her pulse a frantic drumbeat of fear and fury, knowing that nothing could return to the way it was. Each family member confronted their own culpability, their own dark choices, their own hunger for power, and realized that trust was a currency they no longer possessed. The air was thick with resentment, every glance carried suspicion, every step echoed with the threat of confrontation. Rage coexisted with despair, and desperation had hardened into something almost monstrous. No strategy could fully contain the fallout, no compromise could repair the fractures now etched into the very foundation of the Dupree legacy. They were trapped, each decision a razor's edge, and every instinct pointed toward survival, even if survival demanded treachery. Isaiah, calm and unyielding, had become the mirror of their sins, reflecting the magnitude of their ambition and the depth of their failures. By the time he left, the Dupree family was irrevocably changed, once untouchable, now vulnerable, fractured, and haunted by the knowledge that the empire they had built on secrets and power could be annihilated by a single truth. The mansion echoed with silence, a silence that carried the weight of betrayal, fear, and the terrifying realization that they had been living on borrowed control all along. In the wreckage of authority and illusion, anger simmered, wounds festered, and the question that lingered in every mind was whether they could endure the aftermath, or if the Dupree name itself would be consumed by the consequences of its own sins.